All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Bokeh Podcast. I am your host, Nathan Holritz. It is good to have you here today. And for those of you that might be live streaming with us, happy Friday to you. Would love to have you be part of this conversation today. So jump in, ask questions, comment, interact with our brand new guest who I'm going to introduce here in just a second. And take advantage of this opportunity to learn, not just listening, but through conversation as well. We want you to be part of the conversation. For those of you that are not listening to this or watching this live, you're hearing this after the fact, please come join us. If you follow us at Bokeh, B-O-K-E-H podcast on Insta or any of the primary social media channels, you can keep up to date with the upcoming live stream schedule. And would love to have you here as part of the show. Again, ask us questions, engage in the conversation at hand. I hope you'll come do that. On that note, I do want to introduce a brand new guest on the Bokeh Podcast today. And I am very privileged to have Jasmine Newton here with me. Jasmine, thanks for doing the show with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm probably overly excited, but honestly, it's been a little while since I was just kind of randomly browsing the internet. I mean, I was actually working on a separate project, and I told you when I reached out to you, I was like, I was just looking through photographers in Knoxville, and honestly, everything was just kind of running together and looking the same, and I just happened to come across your website, and it grabbed my attention. And so I reached out. I was like, hey, can we do a show together? And you were gracious enough to do this, so thank you so much.
That's so awesome to hear because I just redesigned my website.
Did you really? Okay. Do you do that yourself or are you working
January.
with a company to do that?
I do it myself. I have a Squarespace website, and so ever since the beginning, I've always done my own website.
And, I think Squarespace is a bit underrated in the photography industry. Photographers tend to go to any number of platforms that are geared specifically to photographers. But on kind of the down low, I guess you could say, I tend to recommend Squarespace quite a bit to photographers, especially those who are new to the game, because it's so easy to use. I mean, you could literally have a new website up in an hour or two.
Yes. And that's precisely why I use it. I used to try to do stuff on WordPress, and I ended up crying. So nothing against WordPress, but Squarespace is more my speed. And so I think it's really cool that just right after the redesign, you're like, yes, this stopped me. So it lets me know that it's working. It's doing what it's supposed to
100%.
do.
And honestly, of course, I won't name names or websites or companies, but it was just all running together. Just like the same old from website to website. I was looking probably through, I would have to guess maybe 40, 50 photographers' websites in that area. I was doing a bit of research, brand research for another photographer. And yeah, as I was looking through the marketplace, it just all ran together. And yeah, yours popped. So you're doing a great job.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, and actually on that note, for those of you listening in who don't know Jasmine, I'm going to go ahead and pull up her website here really quick so you can reference it. If you go to Javon, Javonre, Renee, Portraits, Renee, Portraits.com. Of course, we'll link to this in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com for easy reference. And then also follow Jasmine at Javon Renee Portraits on Instagram. Same spelling. Please go do that. Get to know her brand a little bit. Check out her work. And I have to say again, and I should have told you this before we got on air, Jasmine, just so you knew I wasn't kind of blowing smoke, but really your work is beautiful. It's captivating. It's unique in that we don't see, especially in the wedding and portrait world, we don't see a ton of work that not only is this quality, but the style that you're bringing to this brand portrait work that you're doing is just really, really lovely. So we'll make sure to link to your site in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com for anybody listening, and make sure you go check it out. But yeah, seriously, major props to you. Just, if you don't mind, just give like a brief 60-second intro to our listeners who don't know you, don't know your brand, a little bit of a backstory, if you will.
So yeah, my name is Jasmine. A lot of people assume that my name is Javon. You did it.
I totally did. I was totally guilty. And I should know better. 600 plus episodes. Like, I should ask plenty of questions before I make any assumptions. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. But it's something that everybody does. They assume that your name is in the brand. Javon Renee are actually my middle names. So I have two. There was a little bit of a fight over which name I was going to get, and my mom wasn't trying to hear it, so she gave me both. So, but everybody calls me Jasmine. And Javon Renee Portraits is a luxury portrait brand, and I focus primarily on portraits. I don't do events or weddings or anything like that. I am a portrait photographer, and I specialize in branding and legacy portraits. And it's important to me to show women. I really focus on women a lot because I know what it feels like to feel unseen or feel like you have to put yourself away on the shelf, and you don't really spend time really delving into how awesome you are, how great you are, how powerful you are. And so I love getting women in front of my lens and reminding them of that, or showing them that for the first time, or showing them that for the first time in a long time, whether it's for their business or it's for their own legacy, whether they want to, how they want to see themselves 20 years from now, or how they want their descendants to see them 100, 200 years from now. I want to create something awesome. You know, a lot of times we look at celebrities and people like, you know, the queen or the kings and think, okay, yes, they deserve portraits because they've done these great things. Well, it's like, okay, well, you do great things as well. I mean, just you being here is great. So you deserve a portrait of yourself as well.
So giving that kind of acknowledgement, a nod, a beautiful nod at that, to the individual and their significance. What motivates that? Like, can you tell us a little bit more backstory behind why that's become a mission for you?
For me, I mean, like I said, I know what it feels like to not like yourself and put yourself on the shelf. I always had this dream that I would basically be Beyonce. I was going to be a singer and an actress. And, you know, as I grew up and I became a mom, the whole music, the love for music kind of went away. I'd rather spend time being a mom than chasing musical studios and things like that. So I had to find a new passion. And honestly, it really wasn't about finding a new passion because my passion is still the same. My passion is to create, whether it's music, whether it's photos, whether it's poetry or art or anything like that. Like, as long as I'm creating, I'm in alignment with my purpose. But I do remember after becoming a mom, feeling like I had lost myself, because as a woman, your brain goes from paying attention to yourself to paying attention to the family you are now creating. And you often, without really trying, go on the back burner. And a lot of times it can really mess with how you see yourself. It messes with your self-value, especially when it comes to your body changing because you had a kid. And even if you don't have a kid, like, just getting into all of the labels that society puts on you, whether you're a career woman or you're a wife or you're an activist or anything like that, you kind of disappear in that label, and you gotta remember to search for the core of yourself. And for me, it took a lot of work for me to find me again. And once I found me, baby, I will take all the pictures. I will make sure people see me, and I want everybody else to have that same energy, because at the end of the day, when I'm older or when I'm no longer here, you know, I want people to see my portraits and say, oh, she did that. Oh, she was awesome. Like, I come from this person. And I want people to understand that everything about me was about creating and making the world better than I found it.
I think this is so important. I try to delve into this here on the podcast from time to time, and I'm not sure how much it resonates with photographers, because actually, much like myself, when I started in photography, I think many, if not most photographers, they get into photography to take pictures. They like the idea of being a professional photographer. Maybe they consider themselves an artist, and so, you know, photography is their medium. But what you're talking about that is driving your behavior, your mission, is at the core about creativity. And you highlighted something that's really interesting, I think, which is that it's creativity. It's not photography. Photography is the medium for that creativity. But it's creativity. That's what's at the root. So you're creating for the sake of making an impact on the world. And what's important about that, I think, and I'd love to get your take on this, but from my perspective, it's that you're not limited to photography. You could do that through music. You could do that through photography. You could do that through other means. It's the mission, the core mission that's driving that, and photography just happens to meet the medium. That gives you a lot of flexibility, because I think some photographers box themselves in as photographers, and the idea of existence outside of that is kind of hard to comprehend. What are your thoughts?
I am probably anti-box anything.
Fair enough.
do not box yourself in. I mean, you're talking to a girl who, while she was going through school and high school, Probably could have gotten the better grades that everybody tells you to do, but just simply didn't because I thought school was just silly. I mean,
Unfortunately,
it has its purpose. It does.
Sure.
But there was a lot of things that I was learning in school and that I was seeing in school, and I was just like, this is a very limited idea of what the world should be and what we should be learning in order to thrive in it. One thing that I've said all the time, I didn't realize that I could be an entrepreneur until I was about 30 years old. And if I had known earlier, especially when I was in high school, that it was an option for me, I probably would have tried to do it earlier. In school, they teach you three things. You got the military, you got college, you got the workforce. And I didn't have the grades for college, and it's probably best that I didn't go to college because, I mean, now that I know, have seen what people go through in the college space, I'm like, yeah, that probably wasn't my lane. I did go to the Navy only to find out that I had asthma and I had to go. So
Oh no. Okay.
that didn't work out for me. And I tried workforce and I was doing customer service. That's pretty much all that I had on my resume. I did customer service for multiple companies, but I was always good enough to train the supervisor, but never good enough to be the supervisor. So I wasn't really winning in that space either. And I ended up getting fired from my job. And it was just kind of one of those, like, I'm just tired. I've tried all the things that are in that box that they're like, this is what you do to be great. This is what you do to succeed. And the box didn't fit me. So I had to imagine creating my own damn box. Or I don't like a box with an opening. We'll just say I had an opening.
There you go.
And that ended up being entrepreneurship and doing photography. And I tried it and loved it and decided to keep going with it. And it's the best thing that I've ever done. Like I've learned so much about myself just through being an entrepreneur. So
you talked, the phrase that you used was you created your own box. And I think, yes, an open box at that. And that it gives you still have flexibility, right? You're not stuck in that box. But even just that simple idea of you created the so-called box, you created the space to exist in. Unfortunately, a lot of people still don't subscribe to that, especially in modern culture. Whether you're scrolling through social or you're listening to people talk, the narrative is more, quote unquote, this is who I am, ... to fill in the blank. I am this personality type. I am this Enneagram. I am this thing. And people are so quick, like you were talking about earlier, to jump to labels. And it's just so limiting. The possibilities are truly endless. At the end of the day, we got to make some decision as far as a direction to go, but we don't have to box ourselves in. And that is one of the cool things about living in modern first world culture that we're so lucky to be in, that we have the ability, we have the opportunities to make those choices, and we don't have to be limited to these tiny little labels that we tend to want to give ourselves, right? So that's a really important point. I'm glad that you highlight that. I know I could easily park right here because there's a lot more to explore around that topic, but I want to keep going too, just to kind of delve into the business side of things. And I'm curious to get your take on this. This podcast is about helping photographers build sustainable businesses. So we talk about business principles that drive that, and we will here in just a second, actually. But even before that, to me, the priority is helping photographers create sustainable businesses, those businesses that don't force burnout, right? There's the tendency to just, whether it's under the guise of quote unquote hustle or just trying to get a business off the ground and then run it, we get lost in that a lot of times, that we don't take advantage of the flexibility, the freedom that we can have as business owners. So on that note, is there an idea, a principle that has enabled you to maintain some of that flexibility in your life so you can run a business but then enjoy some of the flexibility at the same time?
The biggest thing is it's time management. So I am a workaholic. When I get into what I love doing, I will do that all day.
Okay.
My husband could come looking at me, my son could come looking at me, and they'll be like, are you done? And I'm like, nah, I got more to do. I'm in the zone. But honestly, just having that time management. So I have a calendar. I use a calendar where I put everything that I have to do. And when I think about how I schedule myself out, I have specific days that I kind of prepare my brain for certain types of things. So Like Tuesdays and Thursdays are my networking and meeting days. And Sundays and Mondays are my photo shoot days. And the days in between are like my whatever I want days. You know, if I want to fit in another meeting, or, you know, do something that probably doesn't fit any other days, I can, or they can just be VIP days, which the very important person is me, just in case you haven't figured that out. And then I also work 2 weeks out of the month. So 2 weeks are for me going out and about, doing the photo shoots, going to the meetings, going networking, events, things like that. And then 2 weeks, I pretty much stay home and do work from home, the editing, the working on the website, the things behind the scenes that people don't usually see you out and about doing. For me, that has helped me keep things straight and keep things as balanced as I can make them. I think, you know, it's tricky to have that work-life balance, but it is possible if you figure out what your boundaries are, if you figure out what makes you recharge, what makes you kind of get tired, and you know how to deal with those things, and you kind of work that into a plan, into a schedule.
So first of all, major props to you for being that intentional, because it's easy as business owners to just get lost in it, right? How do you, if you're working, say, 2 to 3 days a week in the office, how are you managing all of the administrative tasks associated with running a business? I know a lot of photographers get lost in that, and that's part of what, you know, whether it's email, something as simple as email, or any other administrative tasks associated with running that business. How do you juggle that, only working 2 or 3 days in the office?
So it's, when it comes to email, I only look at my email up to a certain time. Once 6 o'clock gets here, unless it's an emergency, it just has to wait until the next day. When it comes to answering calls, when people contact me and they want to book me, or they have an interest in book me, there's a form on my website that they fill out, and there's a way for them to schedule a phone call with me. And that schedule is based on, you know, the schedule that I've laid out. That's okay for them to kind of stick themselves in there.
Yep.
So it's based on my Tuesday and Thursday networking and meeting approach. So people can only book me for those days. I think I've extended it right now because I'm not as busy yet. It's beginning of the year. But, you know, when it gets to those busy times, you can only schedule me for these days. And that's when I'm able to talk with you. And that's how it works into my schedule. Or when it comes to the other things like the website, or like I said, you know, retouching photos and things like that, those are done during my 2 weeks that I choose to stay home. So I feel like I can get a lot done in 2 weeks in my pajamas, staying home, chilling, on my own time. Rather than trying to, I got to retouch some photos. And I got to do a photo shoot. And I got to make sure this photo shoot is planned for. And by the way, I got to go and network at. No. It wears me out. I tried that. It wore me out. It might work for some people, but for me, it wore me out to try to mix all of that, you know, jumbled up around each other. So it just prepares my brain to go, okay, these 2 weeks I'm out and about, I'm showing my face, I'm doing things like this. And then there's other 2 weeks where I can kind of, you know, I can take the wig off and kind of relax a little bit and handle stuff behind the scenes where people are not going to see me.
I'm so impressed, though. I mean, it's just not the norm for most business or photography business owners, probably many entrepreneurs in general, but certainly photography business owners. Is that a natural tendency of yours to be that intentional, or was that something that you learned over time?
I had to learn because I had a bit of a breakdown back in 2021. I had reached this place where Javon Renee got so popular, and I was so booked and busy, and I loved it, but it wore me out. I had, in May in 2021, I was getting ready to get out of bed and realized I couldn't. So I was just like, well, maybe I just need to take a day off. The next day, still couldn't. And I was in bed from May until October. Not like, and the only thing that I did was like the photo shoots that were already on the books. I went and did those, and then I'd come straight home, get right back in the bed. So it was just like, okay, I need to figure out what my boundaries are, set those boundaries, be true to my boundaries, because those boundaries are really promises to myself, promises to take care of myself. And I had to figure out, how I want to work, not what society says you have to work. This is how much you should be working. You should hustle, 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 and work every day. And I mean, like I said, that may work for some people, and that's your life, and that's cool. But when it comes to me being able to get out of bed, especially when I'm doing something I love, I have to make sure that I'm creating a life in which I can operate. Because once I'm down, my business is not able to move. So it was just like, okay, I need to have breaks. So I'm fine with, instead of me trying to have 16 clients a month, I'm good on 8 clients a month. And the other 2 weeks are saved for me and, overflow and behind the scenes. And then I also take November and December off in the year because I want to have time to spend, holidays with the fam bam. And that's important to me.
Yeah.
So I've designed my business around that thinking. I'm not trying to fit into my business. My business needs to fit to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's something, as you were talking about, the tendency that people have to kind of fall into that hustle trap. And by the way, I don't want to minimize hard work. Hard work gets us really, really far in life. And we can't ignore that or assume that we can get away without that. But then the flip side of the conversation is if all that we really know to do or are interested in is work, what kind of life is that? I mean, there's so much more to life than a job. And if we can't speak to what else we have interested in or spend time in then work, then to me that raises some questions. It raises some red flags. And I think it should for everybody too. It's great, by the way, that I enjoy my work, but I also enjoy a variety of other things. And I think that we appreciate and tend to enjoy life a lot more if we are looking to other things besides this crazy computer and phone of ours that we're constantly staring at. I think there's way too much that we miss out on as a result. So I think it's good that you highlight that as well. Again, this is another topic we could easily park on. I want to keep going. We talk about the importance of developing a business that's sustainable, but in order to grow that business, there are certain principles that can make a really big impact in growth. And I'm wondering if there's a big idea or principle that has enabled growth in your photography business.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. Yeah. I'm just thinking about a big idea. What I find, at least my limited understanding as a 43-year-old entrepreneur at this point, I've built a few companies, but I find that there are kind of key principles that do most of the heavy lifting, right? There's always nuance in the details, but there are big ideas that tend to make the biggest differences in our businesses to encourage growth. And I'm curious if you've seen a big principle, a big idea that has encouraged growth in your business.
Community over competition. So I could easily say, oh, there's so many photographers around me, how can I stick out and how is anybody going to pay attention to me? I make friends with those photographers and I do what I can to help them. There was a time, probably last year, where one of my clients was just like, oh, did you hear about this photographer? They're getting really, really popular and a lot of people are going to them. You might want to watch out about that person. And I was just like, okay.
To me, that just screams insecurity, right? Like, why is it that we need to somehow put somebody else down? It just screams insecurity to me.
Well, I don't think that they were necessarily putting anybody down. It was just kind of like that watch out because somebody might, kind of top you. And for me, it was just like, when I listened to them and I answered them, I was just like, I don't really have competition. My competition is me. I don't really look at it like that. Like, there's other photographers here in my area that are awesome, that are great. And you go to them instead of me because for a myriad of reasons. Maybe you like their pricing. Maybe you like what they offer as far as the process. Maybe you like their style. Everybody has different reasons why they go for different things. If I go to a store and I look at a dress and I look at a second dress and I pick that other dress over the first one that I saw, does that make that a horrible dress? No, it wasn't the dress for me. So that doesn't, I don't see something like that as like, oh, that's competition. I got to knock them out because they're in, I'm worried about what it's going to do for my business. I don't think about it like that. I'm like, oh, well, we need to be friends. I need to know, you know, who else is popping out here, because we should share ideas and we should talk to each other and we should help each other out. And when I have things, you know, projects that people want me to do that I don't necessarily have the time or the space, or maybe I just don't do, I can refer out to you, especially if you do great work. So I went and met up with the person that they were talking about, and we really kicked it. Like we vibed so hard. So that's cool. You know, and I'm like that with everybody.
Do you? I mean, just to play devil's advocate, the reality, of course, on the other side of the photography industry, or the other side of photographers, is there is the market, and the market doesn't really care about how we feel. It wants what it wants, and we either meet that need or desire, or we don't. So while it's nice to, and by the way, you probably, the little bit that you know of me at this point, you know I'm all about community and relationships. I'm playing devil's advocate, but realistically speaking, is there not some level of awareness that we need to maintain as photographers as to what's going on in the marketplace, so that we at least are able to maintain a distinct brand or brand position?
I think that you have to be aware of what's going on in the industry, of course. That's just, you know, basic business. But at the end of the day, for me, when I look at very popular brands, do they specifically look like they care what everybody else is doing, or do they just be authentically them? I feel like Beyonce is Beyonce because she was authentically her. And she was authentically her so well that she stuck out. Same with any other popular brand you can think of that's kind of stood out amongst their industries, their industry partners and competition. They were so authentically them, and they knew who their audience was, and they knew what their audience wanted. When you're that and you're not really worried about what everybody else is doing, like as far as me, fun fact, I used to be called J-Way Photography. That's how I started out.
Okay.
And J-Way Photography, that was the starting photographer who was worried about the competition, who was thinking that they had to do everything and compete and all of that. And I wasn't exactly niched down either. I did portraits, I did weddings, I did events, I did whatever you could give me, right? And I was not happy doing that, and people didn't know how to refer me because they didn't know what I did, and I wasn't being authentically me. But when I sat down and said, okay, what is authentically me? What feels like me? What do I love? I love doing portraits. I love taking photos of people. I'm not into events. I'm not into weddings. I love putting all my love into one person or that one immediate family and giving them that energy. And Javon Renee, I'm bougie. I'm kind of bougie. So I like a good luxe type of thing. And I was like, I want Javon Renee to feel like that luxe experience. So that's what I turned it into, and I designed my client experience based off of that. But in order for me to do that, what I did was I blocked all the photographers that I knew, and I stopped paying attention to what they were doing, and I created what I wanted Javon Renee's world to be.
Okay.
And I worked hard on making that and tweaking that. When my clients give me feedback, or when I hear certain things about my brand, I'll tweak things here and there and make it better for what the market is seeming to say they want. Yeah. But when it comes to paying attention to like what the competition is doing, I'm not really, I'm paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm trying to make that great.
Yeah. I think you beautifully summed up the healthier and more balanced approach to that, which is be aware of what's going on in the marketplace, but not pay a whole lot of attention to what other photographers are doing. And unfortunately in our industry, the tendency for photographers is to just copy other photographers. That's why, I talked about, as I'm scanning through all those websites, everything looks the same. People are saying the same stuff. They're shooting the same stuff. Their websites are designed. It just looks the same because the tendency is to copy paste. And it's not even ill-intention. There's probably some naivety there. A lot of photographers, myself included, by the way, I don't have a college degree. I didn't have any business training. So like we're all just kind of trying to figure it out as we go. And it's easy to look at somebody else and say, oh, I'll give that a try. Or I really respect this person, so I'm going to do that. And we just kind of tend to pull this stuff in and it just runs together. So I think you represent a really great example actually for our listeners in our community, which is, all right, work on relationships with the photography community. We're not worried about competition per se from them. Develop awareness about what's going on in the marketplace, and then ultimately create what you feel is important to bring to the marketplace, to add value to that marketplace, which is actually a great segue to kind of our topic today, which is the full service branding portraiture that you offer. I mean, there's branding portraiture, or branding portraits in general, have become super popular over the last number of years. More and more photographers are going that direction. And you're specifically focusing on this full service angle, I guess you could say. What does that mean? What does full service branding photography mean?
You don't have to worry about anything. You just show up and you look good. That's
Done
full
for
service.
you. Okay.
So we sit down. As soon as someone books me, the first thing that we're going to do is sit down and talk about how they want their photo session to be. Especially for branding, we want to talk about their brand, who their audience is, how they want to be perceived, all the stuff about their business that is supposed to make them that brand. And a lot of times, people that come to me, they're trying to figure out how to show up in their brand because maybe they've been hiding behind that logo. And now they're trying to show up as themselves and kind of put themselves more in the forefront, add that personal touch to it. And they're trying to figure out how to show up in that. And we sit down and we talk about exactly how to do that. I tell them, what type of things to wear. I help them with that. I style them. Most of the photos you see on my website, I have styled them. I have told them what type of wardrobe to bring. And we've also talked about hair and makeup, and I have a stylist that comes in and takes care of that as well. And all they have to do is come in and enjoy and feel like a boss. Or if it's a personal thing and it's not for business, it's just feeling beautiful or feeling comfortable or authentically you in your own skin, finding your own brand of beauty. That's what I always tell everyone. And then after that, they have their digitals and they have their prints. So they don't have anything to worry about. They got to come and I figured out pretty much the heavy lifting, and they just had to just come and feel good.
And you talked earlier about how it's important to you to be able to have these one-on-one interactions where you're bringing the love, the attention, and energy to an individual. I'm curious what drives that, because we go into business and then kind of mold the business as a reflection, as you talked about, a reflection of ourselves. And I'm curious, is there kind of past life experience that's led to this place where it's really important to you to give that kind of individual care to someone? Where does that come from?
You are asking all these deep questions. It's kind of twofold for me. For me, surface level. I don't like surface level relationships. I like to get deep, and I like when I can do something for you and you show the same care for me. When people are stuck on surface level, or they're only stuck on what they can get out of a person, that really gets to me. And I feel like society is kind of devolving into this kind of, we don't want to take care of people, we want to only take care of ourselves. And that bothers me. It really bothers me to the core of my soul, because it almost feels like, man, we're getting to a place where we're less caring. And the second part of that is in business. Listen, if I'm going to give you some of my hard-earned coins, you are going to have to take care of me, period. And if I got less than what I believe I deserved, then I'm no longer interested in your business. I'm not going to talk about your business. I don't want to feel like a number in your business. I want to feel like I was important, because the coins I spent, they were important. I worked hard for those coins.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like, just having that level of respect, it's a give and take energy, and those energies are sacred. They come with a certain level of respect. They come with a certain level of care. They come with a certain level of love. And if we just interact with each other, knowing that there's that love, that respect, that care in our personal lives and in our business, then hopefully that kind of flips things back to caring about each other on a personal and a business level. Everybody that comes to me, everybody that shows up in front of my camera, I care deeply about them. You don't want to show up crazy in your photos. I don't want you to show up crazy either. I care about your brand too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it shows in your work. I do want to dig into this a little bit more, though, because I'm curious where that comes from, because not everybody has that tendency. I'm a little obsessed, to be honest with you, about this idea of service. And the way that I define it for myself, it's literally, I have it listed out as part of one of my values in service. And the way that I define that is the opportunity, even just on a small level, to make somebody's life better. Like, how can I make that person's life better, whether it's my daughter, my son, my girlfriend, my friend's family. If I can do even just something that makes them smile, that makes them feel a little bit better, that's super fulfilling to me. And I can speak to the psychology that I think drives that. But for you, where does that come from? Did you experience that kind of care, for example, from family in years past? And you were like, oh, I need to take this. That feels good to me, so I want to bring this to other people. Where do you think it comes from?
It comes from knowing how it feels to not feel cared for. Now, speaking about my family has always been very affectionate, very caring, very thoughtful. But once you get out into the real world and you don't necessarily have that protective covering of your family and you see how people treat you, I know how it feels to not feel love, to not feel care.
Got it.
And what that does to you. It's very dehumanizing. And, I don't want anyone to feel that experience in dealing with me. I don't want anyone to feel that experience in dealing with me as their friend, as their family member, as the business that they decided to support. I want everyone to feel like, their energy was respected. And so that's basically why it's so important to me. I don't feel like a lot of people understand what it can do to a person when you ignore, when you shuffle them along, when you act like what they feel or what is important to them is not necessarily important to you. You don't care enough to listen. You don't care enough to hear them out. That's hurtful. And it's hurtful on a biological level. So. Yeah. Talk about another deep topic we could spend a lot of time on, but yeah, absolutely. But it's cool that you develop that sensitivity. Again, not something that's commonplace. Even if internally people might have carry a certain level of care for others, then also I guess the confidence to even show that. And sadly, even in intimate relationships too, people don't tend to go that direction. They hold back for this reason or that. They make one excuse or another. But at the end of the day, if we can make even just a small impact on somebody's life where they feel better because they were around you. To your point, I've had certainly plenty of bad experiences, but the few really incredible experiences where I'm like, I totally did not expect somebody to just engage with me in that way, whether it was the genuine kindness that just shows through in their eyes and their smile and the tone of their voice when they're talking to me, or something that they did for me that was totally unexpected. That's super impactful, and I want to bring some version of that to the people that I engage with as consistently as possible. That's a true goal of mine. So it resonates with me. And let's actually take this then to these sessions. And you mentioned to me before we got started, I think you said that there were kind of three main ideas or principles that drive effective full-service brand portrait sessions like you're describing. And I've literally got a notebook here. I'm going to start taking notes as you're talking, but will you share those with myself and our listeners? So for me, knowing your worth, I think it's very important to know your worth and know what you're bringing to the table, because that's how you're able to basically be sustainable. I think when I started out, I was not charging my worth. And I mean, part of that is, of course, learning the trade and getting better in your photos and all of that. But at the same time, there is worth in that. When people decide to start booking you and paying you, you have a level of worth, and understanding what that is and understanding that you have every right to know it and charge it is very important. And that's why I'm able to create the type of time management that I was talking about earlier. That's why I'm able to work 2 weeks out of the month. That's why I'm able to take November and December off, because I've learned my worth and I've learned how to charge that, particularly in my Lux business. And then when it comes to the second thing, I would say is just love. Just just love. Have love everywhere you go. And I know that sounds woo-woo-y, but it really is so true, because even when it comes to networking, you know, a lot of people think of networking like, okay, you go to a networking group and you hand out your business cards and you tell everybody about your business. And for me, that's not what networking is. When I go to network, the last thing I talk about is my business, actually. I don't even bring up my business until somebody asks me about it. And the reason is because when I'm networking, I'm going there to be like a little ninja, and I'm trying to figure out what everybody else needs, what everybody else needs support in, and if there's any way that I can help that or help them get connected to somebody who can help them with that. That's what I'm there for. And I feel like when you go with that mindset, you are building relationships instead of asking someone to support your business. And when people support a business, they support a business because they like the person, or they have some sort of relationship with the person, or they want to have some sort of relationship with the person. And that's how you build relationships. You go and you be helpful. You connect the dots. So that comes from a place of love. The third one is basically your mindset. It's really, really tough. It's one of the toughest things to get around when you start a business, is your mindset. Because when we grow up, or when we, you know, how we've been raised, there's so many different things that may have happened or may have been taught to us that may have a certain idea around who we are and what we're able to do, what we're allowed to do, how we fit into society and all of those things. And you literally have to work on almost reprogramming that when you become a business owner. Becoming a business owner has helped me learn more about myself personally than anything I've ever done. Like even tops becoming a mom, crazy enough as it is. There's a lot of things that I learned about myself as a mom. There's a lot of things that I learned about myself, you know, after becoming a wife. But man, after starting a business, man, listen, it's almost like you got like you have decided to go into some sort of therapy and learn even more about yourself because there's so many things, there's so many layers that you have to sift through in order to do things. When it comes to pricing and figuring out your self-worth or your self-value, that's one thing. When it comes to imposter syndrome and dealing with self-doubt and fear, there's that. When it comes to maybe you reached a certain level in your business, but now you realize you have new heights and new goals that you want to reach, and now you have to deal with that. And that's a whole nother level of knowing yourself and knowing what you're capable of and empowering yourself. Like, that is huge. So we could sit here all day on that.
We could. Absolutely. Well, I mean, as you're talking to it, literally, I'm taking notes here in this notebook. So I want to go back through these kind of three big ideas that you shared. First was know your worth. And this is an interesting one because I know, and I've said this a number of times in the podcast, but the conversation around pricing has, I think, gotten overly complicated over the years in the industry. And largely because photographers don't start with what you described, Jasmine, which is understanding your personal needs, understanding your personal mission, and then pricing yourself accordingly. A lot of photographers just kind of, again, looking around and like, okay, so-and-so charges this, and this person charges this, so maybe I should just do this. And it's kind of a random guessing game. And obviously it doesn't get us to a great place as a business. Can you give any specific recommendations if a photographer's like, you know what, I know I'm not charging enough, but I feel guilty, or I feel like I don't have enough experience. What would some simple advice be that you would give to those that are kind of struggling with this in order to get to a place where they're more clear, not just about what they're worth, but ultimately what they need to charge in order to create the life that they want to?
Well, the first thing is, first of all, you have to have a portfolio that you love, something that you love to sell. Because if you don't love the work that you do, you're not going to be able to sell it. So you need to create a portfolio that you love. That's the first thing. Once you have that portfolio, those photos that you believe are you love that work, you can sell that work, you can recreate that and and it's something that you love to do. The process of doing that particular work is something that you love to do. For example, I could do weddings, but I didn't enjoy it. So I didn't need to be selling it, but I enjoy having, doing portraits for people. I enjoy having that woman in front of my camera and diving deep into who she is at her core. I enjoy that. I can sell that. You can feel my passion when I talk about it. Mm-hmm. The second thing is, when it came to figuring out my pricing, it was really just, okay, first of all, what are the costs? How much does it cost for me to make this happen? And then I also thought about like how many clients I can handle a month, and what is my number that I need, right? So there's a number that I need to be able to survive, and there's a number that I want to be able to thrive, because I don't want to just pay my bills and just go paycheck to paycheck here. I want to be able to thrive, and so I can do more within my business and do more for my community. So when I take that thrival number and I take that survival number, and I know what both of those are, and then I can, kind of work it in with my costs and with how many clients I'm able to have in a month, that's when I start figuring out, okay, what I should be charging.
And the cool thing about that is it's really easy math. Once you have those figures, you just divide it by the number of clients that you can take in a month. Done. I mean, it's so straightforward in that sense, right? I understand there's some nuance here and there, but I love how you laid that out because it's so simple to follow and understand. And for those of you listening in, whether you're new photographers or existing photographers, established businesses, if you haven't taken the time to carry out that exercise that Jasmine just described, do it now. Do it this weekend. It's so important. It makes all the difference in the world. Jasmine, I was actually just spending time kind of reviewing some of my financial goals as well, because it's important to be clear about what it is that you're trying to achieve. Like you said, not just the survival, but I use the word thrival. I love that. The thrival number, being clear about what that is. And then, of course, you need to kind of work backwards and build the steps to getting to that place. And it's important to do that so you have clarity of direction as a business. And it makes this whole conversation around pricing a lot easier. So I really appreciate that perspective. The second thing you talked about was the importance of love. And I wrote down Be a Love Cat. And it's a reference to a book. I'll pull this up on screen. There's a book.
I love Cat.
You love Cat, yeah. Love is the Killer App: How to Win Business and Influence Friends. It's a book from 2003 by Tim Sanders, and it was actually one of the first business books that I ever read. Because I started shooting in 2001, and it was my first kind of exposure. I had no idea which end was up when it came to running a photography business, and it was one of the first books recommended to me. And this was before the notion of community over competition became so popular. And this individual, Tim Sanders, was encouraging the significance, or putting out there the significance of leading with love, like you were talking about, the importance of service. And in a kind of an old school business world, that was a newer concept. It was really a beautiful, beautiful book. I highly recommend it to anybody listening in. We'll link to it in the show notes. But what can photographers do, particularly those who feel like they're a bit more introverted? They're a little more shy, apprehensive when it comes to engaging with individuals. How can they step out of that shell in order to show that kind of care, that kindness, that concern, that love that you're describing?
I would ask them, what are your boundaries around you being introverted? Like, does that mean that you have a hard time networking? Does that mean you have a hard time talking to people, taking calls? What does that mean for you? Because I could argue that at times I'm introverted. Like when when I have like a group of like 5, maybe up to 10 people around me, like I probably present as extroverted. But when I get into like a room of like 30 people and all of that, I do kind of shrink down. But what I tell myself is, okay, take it into small bites. Find one person. Mm-hmm. And when I find that one person, okay, let's try it again. Find 2. Yeah. And I just take it into small bites. But at the same time, if it hits up against my boundaries, right? If it's too much, then I give myself grace to not have to put myself in those situations. What can I do to still handle my business, but also respect my boundaries? And that's where you have to get creative.
That's fair. I'm curious, And I know I've told this story a number of times on the podcast, but just to share with you as well, Jasmine, there was a time in my life as a photographer and a business owner that I would have labeled myself an introvert as well, kind of similar to what you're describing. And long story short, what I realized was that when I was in these groups of people, workshops, conferences, et cetera, where I ended up feeling exhausted, like physically exhausted, where I have to step out of the room. It was easy at that point to just say I'm an introvert. And, everybody says if you're an introvert, you get tired being around other people. So that must be what I am. But once I actually started to kind of dig into it, I realized the issue for me personally at the time was that I was trying to put on a front. And that's actually what was exhausting. I was trying to put on a front and kind of be not necessarily center of attention, but bring the party to the party kind of thing. And that doesn't come naturally for me. And that's what was exhausting. I was trying to put on this front. So once I stopped putting on that front and I did exactly what you were talking about, which is to focus on the individual conversation, I was good to go. And what's interesting about that is I think a lot of times introversion comes from a place of insecurity, and insecurity and introversion, those ideas are a reflection of more of an inward focus, like we're focusing on ourselves and how we feel about the outside world versus how they actually feel about us. And when you're focusing on an individual conversation, it redirects that focus from us to the person in front of us, and it kind of frees up that kind of frantic tendency to protect ourselves. I'm wondering what your take is on that from your experience.
So this is funny. So like I spent the beginning of my entrepreneur journey feeling like I had to put on this persona of, okay, I'm a luxe brand, so let me dress up this way and let me talk this way and let me handle this, so
Yeah.
And then it was just like, this is so not me. So I even when I used to like advertise my services, there used to be like the classical piano behind my behind the scenes videos and like it used to be all of that.
You're really trying hard.
Yeah, but it wasn't really like people were noticing, but it wasn't really resonating.
Sure.
But then like I started, there was what year was it? It was 2021.
Okay.
I started telling myself Empress vibes. That was like something I would say to myself in my head anytime I got nervous, anytime I got bothered, anytime I just didn't feel good. Empress vibes.
Okay.
I
What does
used
that
to
mean?
wear a head wrap all the time. Think of yourself as a queen. How does a queen handle herself? Is a queen bothered by what anybody thinks of her, or is she too busy queening? So that's how I would, and I used to wear a head wrap to remind myself, okay, you're a queen. You ain't worried about it. Don't think about, oh my gosh, there's all these people in this room. They're going to think this about me. Think these people in this room, there's somebody in here that needs me. There's somebody in here that needs to meet me.
Yeah.
There's somebody in here whose purpose is possibly wrapped up in meeting me. So for me, that's what I would tell myself. It's just Empress vibes. Now, this year is beast mode. Like I'm on beast mode.
Okay.
So I'm really pushing, and I'm really getting myself out there. But once I started with that Empress vibe, it was like, okay, I need to be more authentically me. I started putting hip hop music in my behind the scenes. I started sharing more of like my opinions on certain things. People are like, oh my God, I love your videos. Your videos are so funny. Apparently I'm a funny person. I didn't realize that I have some sort of comedy talent. Like,
Okay.
but because I was being more and more myself, and I was just letting myself be, letting myself show up exactly how I was made, because I just simply said, someone in here needs me, and whoever's talking about me, it ain't none of my business what they got to say about me, because it ain't got nothing to do with what I'm here for.
Right. That totally makes sense. Yeah. It's mindset, like you were talking about earlier, the significance of that. And in fact, I actually want to finish with that. Your third point, the importance of developing a healthy mindset. I mean, you just gave a beautiful example of the significance of mindset, shifting mindset, and as a result, shifting your experience of the world. And is that, are those principles that you learn, like, are you an avid reader? Did you learn this from friends, from family, from mentors? Like, how did you learn to develop a healthier mindset for the sake of enabling yourself as a business owner?
Plenty of books, plenty of YouTube videos. I love listening to certain people. Am I able to say to certain people I like listening to?
Go for it, yeah.
So I love listening to Gary Vee. Gary Vee is definitely, he's a big cusser, and that's my language. I cuss like a sailor, and so does he.
Yeah.
So Gary Vee, and I love that a lot of things that he's saying, he's basically talking about gratitude. He's talking about service. He's talking about love. He's talking about giving people grace and understanding. And there's a book that I read, Brand Brilliance, it might be. Do not ask me the author, but it's Brand Brilliance. That's what walked me through rebuilding my brand when I changed from J-Way to Javon Renee. And then when it comes to fear and self-doubt and changing your mindset, that was Sue Bryce. So Sue Bryce, she's a pretty popular photographer. She's pretty popular.
Yeah, has been for a long time. Yeah.
Great education, and what she talks to you, how she explains fear and where that comes from and how to deal with it, helped me tremendously. So yes, it was books. It was looking on YouTube. It was taking educational courses. It was all the things, and then I just soak up things like a sponge, and I try things until I figure out what works for me. And what works for me, even past all of the people that I named, what works for me is realizing who I am and who I come from. And for me, my personal truth is I come from a source that put something in me to bring here. And there's nobody else in the world like me, nobody else in the multiverse like me. And I have my own specific thumbprint that I can put on the world in this time, in this space. Nobody else is going to do it like me, and I better get busy doing it. It doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. It doesn't matter what the competition is thinking. I'm here to do my thing, and hopefully I can get it all done before my time is up.
I love that. Goodness, what a beautiful way to sum up the conversation. and actually, just before we go, Jasmine, is this the book here, Brand Brilliance, Elevate Your Brand and Shape Your Audience? Yes. I love that book. Perfect. And we'll link to that in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. I had a couple of comments. Sue was saying, enjoying this. Thanks. And Patrick says, thank you for the honest conversation. And I appreciate everybody who has live streamed and listened in today. And Jasmine, ultimately, I mean, you brought so much, first of all, just wonderful conversation, but so much practical advice too. And I really appreciate that. It's super meaningful for our brand. Will you just remind our listeners one more time where they can find and follow you online?
Everywhere, I'm just Javon Renee Portraits, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or my website, just Javon Renee Portraits. JavonReneePortraits.com for the website.
Perfect. And we're going to put that all in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, for listening in. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks again, Jasmine. I really, truly appreciate this.